The 13th Warrior wasn't just another epic, it was Beowulf reborn in blood and fog. But behind the swords and the shadows, it was legend turned against itself. A mother of monsters. Her face changed, but her hunger never did. The 13th Warrior, born from myth, buried in truth, and a vision so dark, it lit the path for every fantasy that followed. These are 20 weird facts about the 13th Warrior, and hidden inside the mist and the myth, it was a war of vision, one man's saga buried by another's will. The monsters weren't in the cave. They were behind the camera. Number 1. Before it was the 13th Warrior, it was Eaters of the Dead, and even the title sounded cursed. Director John McTiernan, fresh from Die Hard and Predator, delivered a grim, atmospheric cut built on silence, mud, and fear. He wanted myth told through realism, a dream that looked like documentary. But when test audiences left confused and bored, the studio panicked. The film was too quiet, too strange, too uncommercial. That's when author and producer Michael Crichton took the reins. He ordered rewrites, new scenes, a new score, and a new ending. The two visions collided. McTiernan's grounded survival tale versus Crichton's pulp adventure. The edit became a battlefield, each side cutting and reshaping until neither could claim victory. What finally hit theaters was a patchwork born of conflict, a movie forged between two masters who couldn't agree on what legend should look like. The story may have been about Vikings and monsters, but the real war was waged in the editing room. Number 2. In McTiernan's original cut, the Wendol's mysterious mother wasn't a warrior queen. She was ancient, skeletal, and still. Veteran actress Susan Willis played her as Crichton had written her in Eaters of the Dead, a matriarch so old she looked carved from bone, commanding death with a whisper instead of a scream. But when early test audiences watched the heroes storm her lair and kill her, they recoiled. The victory felt cruel, not cinematic. Crichton, now in control of reshoots, made the call. The mother was recast as a younger, more physical figure, now portrayed by Kristen Cloak under layers of fur and shadow. No one outside the crew knew the swap had happened, and when credits rolled, Willis's name still appeared, a haunting echo from a version the world never saw. The mother's face changed, but her myth stayed the same, a goddess rewritten by fear, test cards, and the strange power of audience discomfort. Number 3. When Michael Crichton seized the film, even the music became collateral damage. Graham Revell had already written a complete score, a dark, brooding soundscape built around Nordic chants and percussion that matched McTiernan's realism. But Crichton wanted more emotion, more melody, something grander. Revell's work was scrapped, and legendary composer Jerry Goldsmith was brought in to rebuild the film's soul. Goldsmith worked fast, reshaping key sequences and turning the stoic battles into operatic spectacle. His brass-driven themes gave the warriors nobility, his strings gave Ibn Fadlan grace, and his drums made the fog itself seem alive. What audiences heard was triumph. What they didn't hear was the ghost of an entire score buried beneath it. Number 4. Few films bled money like The 13th Warrior. What began as a bold $85 million adventure soon spiraled into one of Hollywood's costliest cautionary tales. Endless rewrites, massive reshoots, and two competing directors sent the budget soaring past $100 million, with insiders whispering it may have climbed closer to $160 million once marketing and delays were tallied. Production dragged for years. Sets were rebuilt, battles reshot, and entire scenes re-edited under Michael Crichton's supervision after test audiences recoiled from John McTiernan's original cut. By the time the film finally reached theaters in August 1999, the summer box office had already been conquered by The Sixth Sense and The Blair Witch Project. The momentum was gone. The 13th Warrior opened with a whisper instead of a war cry, earning only $61 million worldwide, a fraction of what it cost to make. Once envisioned as the next great historical epic, it became a case study in studio panic, creative conflict, and the brutal math of filmmaking. In the end, the true battle wasn't on screen. It was the one fought behind the camera, where ambition proved more dangerous than any sword. Number 5. Rumors of a lost McTiernan cut have haunted the 13th Warrior for decades. Crew members recalled a version 5 to 10 minutes longer, with slower pacing, deeper political intrigue, and a tender subplot between Ahmad and a Viking noblewoman. When Crichton took over, those threads vanished. He rewrote scenes, reshot the climax, and even replaced lines to shift the tone from horror to heroism. Fragments of McTiernan's cut still survive in trailers and production stills, glimpses of deleted battles, and a quieter farewell between Ahmad and the surviving warriors. Fans have spent years piecing together what was lost, calling it Eaters of the Dead, the director's cut. Whether that version still exists is unknown, but like the Wendol themselves, its shadow lingers. Half myth, half memory, devoured by time. Number 6. Before The 13th Warrior was a film, it was Michael Crichton's strangest experiment, a 1976 novel called Eaters of the Dead. He wrote it on a dare after a friend called Beowulf boring. Determined to prove otherwise, Crichton fused the old epic with gritty realism, reimagining positioning its monsters as something human and terrifying. Part myth, part anthropology, the novel blurred the line between legend and history, warriors facing horror that reason couldn't explain. Its tone was cold, brutal, and hypnotic, a travelogue that slowly devolved into nightmare. Hollywood saw in it a challenge few could resist, a story where ancient heroism met modern dread, and myth was dragged, kicking and bleeding, into reality. Number 7. Ahmad ibn Fadlan wasn't just a character, he was real. A 10th century Arab diplomat, scholar, and writer, he journeyed from Baghdad to the edge of the known world as part of a mission to meet the Volga Bulgars. His surviving writings describe in vivid detail the Viking traders he encountered, their rituals, ships, and funerary rites. The Wendol, however, were pure invention. Crichton took inspiration from prehistoric bear cults and Neanderthal myths, imagining them as a primitive tribe clinging to extinction. The historical and the fantastical merged until it was impossible to see where fact ended and fear began. The 13th warrior may not be true history, but its bones are, buried in a 1,000-year-old manuscript where a scholar met his monsters, and the world grew larger than anyone had imagined. Number 8. The number 13 wasn't random, it was ritual. In Old Norse sagas, the Danish king Hrolf Kraki rode with 12 champions, each a warrior bound by blood and loyalty. Among them was Bodvar Bjarki, a hero said to possess the strength and spirit of a bear. Scholars have long argued that Bjarki and Beowulf are mirrors of the same myth, two reflections of one ancient legend. The 13th warrior revives that symmetry. Bulawif and his 12 men echo the sacred circle of champions, their outsider, Ahmad ibn Fadlan, completing the number. When he joins their quest, he isn't just the 13th man, he's the outsider who gives the legend meaning, the witness who turns myth into story. What began as Beowulf's roar became a whisper through fog and fire, the tale of men who became myth, and one stranger who wrote it down. Number 9. You never truly see the Wendol, and that's what makes them terrifying. McTiernan's vision cloaked them in fog and flickering torchlight, their movements glimpsed only in fragments, a blur of fur, a flash of bone, a scream swallowed by night. The effect was deliberate. He wanted the audience to doubt what they saw, to wonder whether the monsters were supernatural or simply human evil hiding in the dark. The fear had roots older than cinema. Across Northern Europe, ancient steppe myths told of cannibal tribes who struck in fog, leaving only silence behind. Crichton's Eaters of the Dead resurrected that dread, turning anthropology into nightmare. In The 13th Warrior, the fog isn't just atmosphere, it's an enemy. Every shadow moves, every breath echoes, and what you can't see becomes the thing you fear the most. Number 10. One of the film's most haunting scenes doesn't involve blood or blades. It's about understanding. As Ahmed travels north, he can't speak a word of the Vikings' language. Around their campfire, he listens as they laugh and argue, their words unintelligible. Night after night, the same scene plays, until something shifts. McTiernan films the moment like a spell breaking. Norse words fade into English as Ahmad's comprehension grows, the camera circling his face as meaning replaces confusion. It's a cinematic illusion that turns learning into revelation, one that critics later hailed as genius. In a movie built on battles and monsters, this quiet exchange of words becomes its first victory. The scholar becomes a warrior, not through the sword, but through the language of survival. Number 11. Before the swords ever met, the 13th warrior built tension through manners, not metal. Ahmad ibn Fadlan arrived among the Norse as an outsider, appalled by their rituals, their mead-soaked laughter, their lack of cleanliness. McTiernan shot these early encounters like anthropology under fire. Close-ups of food shared by hand, water poured from one bowl, customs clashing in silence. Yet those same moments became bridges. Ahmad's horror gave way to fascination, his judgment to respect. That cultural friction is the film's real heartbeat. Long before the Wendol attack, it's the small gestures, washing, praying, breaking bread, that mark the first contact between civilizations. By the time battle comes, the fear of the unknown has already changed sides. Number 12. Among men who worshipped war and thunder, Ahmad ibn Fadlan carried a different weapon, faith. Surrounded by warriors who mocked his prayers and cleansing rituals, he never wavered. Director John McTiernan made sure of it, insisting that no matter how chaotic the battle, Ahmad would always stop to pray, even if the camera only caught a glimpse. Those quiet moments survived every rewrite, a bowed head in the mist, a verse whispered before bloodshed. While others roared to Odin, he stood still, his calm cutting deeper than any blade. In a world ruled by strength and steel, his conviction became his armor. armor, and when the fighting ended, it wasn't the sword that endured, it was the soul behind it. Number 13. In the darkness of the Wendol caves, the warriors uncover their enemy's secret. Skulls carved like masks, pelts worn as armor, rituals performed in bearskins. The revelation reframes everything. These weren't monsters born from myth, but humans who'd chosen to become beasts. McTiernan borrowed from prehistoric bear cult legends, tribes who worshiped the animal for strength and survival. It's a chilling inversion of the hero's own code. The Vikings fight to protect their people. The Wendol fight to preserve their extinction. Civilization and savagery mirror each other in a single image. A man's face hidden behind the snout of a god. In that moment, the 13th warrior stops being fantasy and becomes something older. A reminder that the real monsters are the ones who still believe they're divine. Number 14. Every Viking in the 13th warrior wears a different past on his back. Some are wrapped in fur and bone, others in dented Roman steel or Eastern chainmail. None of it matches, because it wasn't meant to. McTiernan and the costume team built each warrior's look as a living record of survival. In Norse culture, trophies weren't just taken from enemies, they were worn. A man's armor told the story of who he'd beaten and who he'd become. Historians confirm the detail rings true. Norse mercenaries once served in the Byzantine Empire's Varangian Guard, collecting gear and weapons from across continents. On screen, that patchwork style turned the company into something more than a warband. They looked like a museum of conquest and memory. When the light hit their armor, it wasn't just gleaming metal, it was history, dented and breathing, moving into battle. Number 15. Cinematographer Peter Menzies Jr. painted the 13th warrior like a nightmare carved from ice. Daylight scenes glow in steely blues and fog grays, giving the landscape a ghostly alien quality. When the sun falls, the palette flips, torchlight flares, embers burn red against black, and every face flickers between shadow and fire. McTiernan wanted the North to feel foreign, even to the people who lived there. Shot in the cold wilderness of British Columbia, the visuals were brutal and beautiful. Every breath steamed, every storm felt bone deep. The camera lingered on firelight reflected in eyes, on frost clinging to fur, small details that made the legend feel lived in. The result was less a fantasy and more a fever dream, where even the light seemed to take sides in battle. Number 16. For a movie about monsters, the 13th warrior might be one of Hollywood's most grounded Viking tales. Yes, the accents shift, the maps are vague, and the dates blur, but the spirit is right. The Northmen are shown not as savages, but as thinkers, builders, and poets of war. Their camaraderie, their funerals, their sense of fate, all drawn from sagas older than any script. Filmed in Canada's mountain fog, the atmosphere feels like a lost fragment of history, damp, cold, and endlessly real. McTiernan's attention to detail extended even to speech. The way warriors boast, drink, or mourn feels pulled straight from Norse literature. It isn't strict history, but it's truthful myth, the kind that hums with memory. Long after the monsters fade, what lingers isn't the horror, but the humanity beneath it. Number 17. When the 13th warrior finally stumbled into theaters, critics were ready for battle. Roger Ebert gave it just 1.5 stars, calling it a little unsettling to sit through non-stop slaughter and then witness a pious conclusion. Variety dismissed it as a bloody but anemic story of he-men with broadswords and long ships. Even Entertainment Weekly labeled it an expensive growl without a soul. The marketing had promised an epic. What audiences got felt, to many, like two films wrestling inside one frame. And yet, not everyone drew blood. The Washington Post called it the summer's primo guilty pleasure, praising its old-school grit and physicality. Some admired Antonio Banderas's quiet performance, arguing that his calm grounded the chaos. Over time, what critics once saw as confusion began to look like texture, a rare attempt to make myth feel tangible. It wasn't the cleanest victory, but in the war between spectacle and sincerity, the 13th warrior fought with honor. Number 18. Years later, the warriors rose again, this time online. As the 2000s brought DVD extras and fan forums, a strange thing happened. The 13th warrior found defenders. Viewers who'd missed it in theaters rediscovered its fog-drenched mood, its grounded violence, and its melancholy tone. They saw what the studio couldn't, a film made by conviction, not committee. Today, it stands among cinema's proudest lost causes, celebrated for atmosphere over polish, craft over perfection. Even modern directors have praised its restraint, its tactile grit, and its refusal to spoon-feed exposition. What began as one of Hollywood's loudest flops slowly transformed into something far rarer, a cult legend whispered about by those who saw beauty in its scars. Number 19. In 1999, a Muslim hero leading a Hollywood epic was nearly unheard of. The 13th warrior broke that mold, placing Antonio Banderas's Ahmad ibn Fadlan at the heart of a Norse saga. He wasn't comic relief, a sidekick, or a stereotype. He was the lens through which the audience saw the story, thoughtful, spiritual, and deeply human. For many viewers, that representation mattered. Ibn Fadlan Fodlan wasn't written as a stranger in need of saving. He was the one who learned, adapted, and led by faith. His courage wasn't about domination, but understanding. In an era of sword and sorcery tales dominated by European heroes, the 13th warrior did something radical. It handed the legend to someone from another world, and in doing so, made the story belong to everyone. Number 20. The 13th warrior didn't conquer the box office, but its shadow stretched far beyond 1999. Its moody realism, equal parts myth and mud, became a template for the next generation of dark fantasy. You can see its fingerprints in Game of Thrones, where outsider eyes and grounded brutality replaced fairy tale spectacle. You can feel its DNA in Vikings, the Northmen, and even The Witcher. Worlds where heroism smells of smoke and sweat, and the line between history and legend stays blurred. The film's atmosphere became its true legacy. Decades later, cinematographers still cite its use of fog and firelight, its refusal to glamorize death, and its quiet respect for ritual. What was once dismissed as bleak became the modern standard of authenticity. The 13th warrior may have fallen in theaters, but its spirit marched on into every saga that dared to look history in the eye and see myth staring back. Bonus fact: not every relic of the 13th warrior was lost to the mists. One of the film's full-scale Viking longships was rescued from storage and sent thousands of miles from the battlefield to Epcot's Norway Pavilion at Walt Disney World. There, under Florida sunshine, it found new life as a children's playground centerpiece. A relic of cinematic war turned into a family attraction, floating beneath a Disney flag. The irony runs deep. A film once crushed by studio politics and creative conflict ended with its greatest artifact displayed by the same company that owned it all along, Touchstone Pictures, a Disney subsidiary. The warriors may have fallen, but their ship sailed on, immortalized not in battle, but in laughter. The 13th warrior was born from myth and undone by ambition, a film carved from legend, then buried by its own makers. Two directors, two visions, one costly war between art and control. Yet beneath the ruins lies something rare, a story that bleeds authenticity, faith, and wonder. A cursed production, a legend rediscovered. If this saga still haunts you, if you can hear the drums in the mist, drop a comment and tell us what forgotten epic we should unearth next.